wind and he blew the whole... Louis Michel Thibault. And this man has got a lot of background. I mean, he's French for one thing, and he joined the Swiss mercenary army.
That's part of my speech.
I know.
He wants me to be quicker.
I mean, imagine being a mercenary. So the Dutch East India Company called for the Swiss mercenaries to come to the Cape because they wanted to make sure that the British didn't take over the Cape because it was now belonging to the Dutch. And so the Swiss mercenaries were here to kill anybody who was going to be near taking over. He later on left the mercenaries, and he liked Plettenberg so much that he started doing what he was meant to do and what he was taught to do and what he was qualified to do, and that's architecture. And you'll hear all about the architecture and the buildings that he's built. I mean, this is something else, part of South Africa. And this should have been double the size hall with more people. But I don't think they realize how important this guy is. Okay, Rodney, it's yours to talk.
Thank you, Len. Now we've got to know what to do with this thing. You said if I put it there,
I've got a seat there.
it'll be okay.
Oh, I can sit here. No.
Right.
I won't sit in front of him.
We'll wait for the boss to sit.
A national architectural style known throughout the world, even today, of South African Cape Dutch. He was born in Picquigny, and it's a little town, a small town on the Somme River, and we know very little about his early life, except that he must have been strongly affected by the architecture. Next slide. Oh, I don't have a dingus, you know. Next slide. No, you've gone too many. Go back. Back. Another back. There, that one, there. Yeah, this guy. This one. Right. He must have been affected by the architecture which he found in and around where he lived. Amiens Cathedral, one of the greatest cathedrals in France. 13 k's up the road, so he knew it well. And particularly, go. I was just warming up, man. Redwoods. He didn't know about redwoods. You know, I've only got 51 minutes. Don't count. I'm counting these because I want them back at the end. Right. And sorry man, you guys messed me up. The Beau Dieu of Amiens is one of the most famous things, and probably the finest sculpture of a portrait of Christ himself. And then, next slide, only one time, that guy, yeah. Right in his backyard were medieval ruins and Roman ruins. Next one, come. And he had this wonderful church in his own backyard, in his own church. Now, his talent for drawing was first noticed by the local priest, Pastor Louver. And he spoke to his father and talked him into the idea that young Louis should go and study further. And then, at his And there we go. Confirmation. At his confirmation in Amiens, he got hold of the bishop and told the bishop what a wonderful bloke this guy was and what a wonderful talent he was. And the bishop got him enlisted in the Royal Academy. The Royal Academy had been established by Louis XIV because he was jealous as hell. The Brits had one, he didn't, so he made one. So there we go. And now he arrived in Paris in 1770. He was recognized immediately by a guy called J.P. Gabriel. Now, J.P. Gabriel was the chief architect of the king, and he was director of the Royal Society. And he noticed Thibault immediately. And Thibault flourished. He won all of the student competitions. He was like #1 student. And when I was a young architect, the professor got all the best students, not me, the best students. And same here, Gabriel picked on Thibault to become his assistant. We used to think of it as slave labor, but I'm sure that Gabriel decided that it was education. Versailles, the palace, was nearly finished, and to be by Laveau and Mansard. But the king wanted a really special little palace. This is Louis XV. Wanted a special little palace as a gift for his chick, Madame du Barry. Let's have Madame du Barry. And that little, called Le Petit Trianon. And he was commissioned, Gabriel was commissioned to design and build this lovely little, this is my drawing. I've actually sat there and drawn it. Yes, how exciting, eh? And so he drew this, and Thibault was his student. I drew this, and Thibault was his student. And Gabriel was called upon to design it. And if I put the two together, the next slide, you're giving a game away by having those two. But anyway, the next two together, you can see Koopmans de Wet House. Can't you start to see a resonance? A bit of Petit Trianon down in the Cape on Strand Street. Now, Louis XV was succeeded by Gabriel as the Academy's director. What else? His wife actually loved Petit Trianon. Marie Antoinette, she was absolutely loved it. And bad luck for Madame de Barry, but that's how the croissant crumbles, you know. But on the 21st of September, the next slide, please. On the 21st of September, Thibault had the honor of presenting to the king a project that he had worked on. It was a model made of terracotta of a French order of architecture, which he had designed. It was 3 foot 6 inches tall, made in terracotta, as I said, and consisted of 3 columns on a triangular base, and enriched, I'll have you know, with an abundance of florid decorations. And as they say, the whole being very original and pleasing. Now, this drawing is actually in the Colby collection in the museum in Cape Town. We've got it. What a treat, eh? And to the drawing, who will read this for us? I've got the English translation, don't worry. To the drawing, Thibault wrote the following. He added the following inscription. A plan of a French order designed by myself in 1774 and presented to the king on the 21st of September 1776. The model was made by me of terracotta. I was then, listen to this, in Paris in the position of premier student of the Academy, of the Royal Academy. So from this we can learn that our boy was no shrinking violet, and which is very acceptable in an architect. In fact, it's almost mandatory. Secondly, he was clearly a man of talent. And thirdly, he had a great love of architecture, which doesn't even come close to explain why, as soon as he got this all, he threw it all up and went and studied military engineering with a Swiss guy, how would you say? Swiss guy called Charles Murion. And And I believe he did that because he wanted to be the Renaissance man. This is our guy, the Renaissance man, like Leonardo. He studied military engineering as well as art and architecture, and so did Leonardo, and so did our boy. Then a strange thing happened in the Cape. Admiral Suffren landed in Cape Town in 1783 and dropped off 3,000 troops to assist the governor, one of whom was Thibault. And by now, he was a lieutenant. He was a lieutenant in the army. Now, many began to see this as a takeover, and it looked like a takeover. These Frenchmen were everywhere. But it did, one must appreciate, that it did have a big effect on the colony. It certainly brought a degree of prosperity, as we're going to uncover when we discuss the buildings. It also brought a new talent, our boy Louis, and by now he was 31 years old and still a lieutenant, soon to be made a captain. But he was busied with making maps and drawing plans of all the fortifications at the Cape, and so that was taking his time very much so. The VOC at this time were desperately trying to keep a control of the Cape. All these Frenchmen everywhere, and there were about 12,000 people in the Cape, settlers and so on, and they dropped 3,000, so it's a big number, and they were trying very much to try and keep a control of this. You know, the VAC had a mad system where everybody knew what everyone else earned. So what happened is they brought in rules about religion and about dress and lifestyle, and these rules started to be queried by all these new Frenchman chaps. Now there was one, can I have the next slide, please? That one? That one. Also a drawing by me. One Martin Melk, a rich settler and a Lutheran, and he wanted to build a Lutheran church. So he appealed to the VOC, and they said, no, the wrong accent, they just said no. And he said, what happens if I invite all my friends home to my house for us to pray together on Sunday? So they thought, is that all right? Yes, very reluctantly. And so our friend, he went and he built an enormous barn. This whole thing looked like a barn until our team got hold of it. He built this enormous barn and invited all his friends home to pray. And the VOC looked and they thought, oi. No, they didn't, wrong accent also. They thought, well, and they just sort of closed a blind eye to it. Now, Melk's daughter was very friendly with a guy called Anton Anreich, our best sculptor, the best ever. And so she spoke to Daddy, and Daddy asked him to come along. Can't you make this barn look a bit like a church? And Anton came along, and he started to work, and he called in his friend Thibault. And Anton, next slide, please. Okay. And Thibault started to make it not too much like a church, but a bit heading that way. And then the next one, meanwhile, Anreich. Next slide, thank you. Next slide, Anreich started to put his sculptures into, he did the organ and the pulpit. This pulpit is held, these are full-size sculptures. They are incredible. You sit there and you just want to go, and isn't it so beautiful? Suddenly he was recognized, and he was made chief sculptor of the company. And from that time, there was a long association with Thibault. And Thibault was then given, the next slide, please. Next slide. The parsonage to complete the complex. And you can see this is starting to head the way that our friend was doing his architecture. But jobs were starting to flow in. Can we have the next one? The next one was a house called Papenboom. And this is a house, and this is a painting done by Lady Anne Barnard of Papenboom. She said it is the only tasteful house in the whole of the Cape, Lady Anne did. And it's sometimes called the brewery because this little building here was a brewery, but that was it. And the next slide, please. This is the last picture we have of Papenboom just before it was demolished. And this was a time when Thibault loved the Cape. Hell did he love the Cape. And more so one gorgeous chick called Elizabeth van Schoor, daughter of a burgher and a councillor. Thibault decided he's going to resign from the VOC, and in 1785 he married Elizabeth. That's when he proposed to her, but they actually got married first thing in the new year. So Thibault resigned from the VOC, married his Elizabeth, but Van der Graaf, by now the VOC had decided that our dear chap von Plettenberg wasn't making the cut. So they replaced him with Van der Graaf, and he became the new governor. And now Van der Graaf was sitting in a position where he'd just taken all of this lot over with all these Frenchmen, and with the message that you go and occupy that place. You can't go and grab the whole of a continent and sit in one corner. So Van der Graaf decided he wasn't going to lose Thibault. So he made him the superintendent of the company's buildings, which he accepted, provided that he had a fairly free rein to carry on with his practice. Now, I want you to just wait 1 minute, and let's examine these dates. Van der Graaf, von Plettenberg left his office in 1785, and Van der Graaf was appointed in 1785, and this Thibault was appointed as chief of the company's buildings in 1785, and that is the exact date when Francois Duminy was given instructions to go ahead with a timber industry in Plettenberg Bay. Now, I have never ever heard it mentioned that maybe Thibault designed our timber store, but you've got to think he was in charge of the department, he was the boss, and it was decided at the same time, and so I'll leave that for you for another day, but I think it's just such a wonderful thing. But Thibault carried on with his job as a military engineer, and he was put in charge of the military academy for the artillery cadets. And he was a very, very busy man. There was no shortage of work for this man, and he was offered several public appointments, but he soon resumed a former profession as architect. Van der Graaf launched an extravagant development plan for Cape Town, much of which he threw into Thibault's lap. And much of it was correcting old buildings that the previous guys hadn't bothered about. But at the same time, he was given a house called Eight Cake, the next one, Eight Cake. Eight Cake he built in 1788. This was the first of his really manor houses that he built in 1788. They found in, I think, 1970, murals in the entrance hall under 15 layers of paint. It took them 3 years to clean them off, and if you go to Eight Cake, you can go and see them there now. But his big job was to try and get all these old buildings and put them back into some order. If I could have the next picture. One of his jobs was to get hold of the governor's quarters. The governor's quarters were built in the middle of the castle, and they were drab. Awful, sad, sick, terrible. And he got the job of fixing them all up. Let's have another picture of my drawing of it's not as good as I'd like it to be, but, oh no, that's bad. Let's go back to the first one, we'll leapfrog it. Go back there. So he got this job of fixing this particular building, and what he did was he fixed everything else in the interior, but he made what is called the cat balcony. And the cat balcony was one of the best known of those. It was the place where the governor would propose statutes and give laws and to create all sorts of things and criminals. And so this was like a stage. Everyone stood out the front here and they listened to all the good stuff that he had to say. Now, if I could have the next picture, just skip the drawing one. Next. You can look at the detail he put into it. You might think it's over the top, but look at Anra's sculptures. Man, they're wonderful, eh? And look at the detail he put in. This is the front doorknob, hey? Don't you wish you had a front doorknob like this? Then the next house he got, came his way, was Friedenhof. If we could go and have a look at Friedenhof. Friedenhof was the next one. You can see that he's still hanging back with that French tradition, a bit of Petit Trianon, the double story, the lined up windows, and he built that. Then came the biggie. If I could have the next picture, please. The next biggie was, he was commissioned in 1788 by Hendrik Klute, who had bought Simon van der Stel's old homestead, originally built in 1691, now in almost a ruinous state. And this is, actually it doesn't look so ruinous, but this is, I think Lady Anne Barnard was being nice and gentle. And he was commissioned to virtually rebuild the whole place, including wine cellar and a number of other buildings. If I could have the next picture, please. And so this gave him the opportunity to bring his friend onto the picture. And this is the building that he produced. Fabulous work. Reluctantly, he called in Anra, who was a fabulous sculptor. But unfortunately, there were no materials in the Cape. You know, this boy needed marble and stuff. But he did the best he could. And you know, every time I go down this avenue, I get goosebumps. When I walk down this avenue, the trees approaching this facade, where he took an emerging architecture and he overlaid it with a French flair. And he gave it a bit of integrity and a bit of structural stability. And then the next part of the job became, if I could have just the detail. Look at this sculpture by Anton Anra. Fabulous stuff. But part of the job was to build a winery, the next one. That must have been an incredible challenge. I mean, it's a box. But somehow he's done it just with such a touch of class. Such a touch of class that it fits in. And let's have a look at the gable, because that's something worth looking at. And look at the detail that Anton Anra put in. And you know, you go there and you just feel that the world is right. That the world is how it should be. And then about the same time, Koopmans de Wet House came onto the boards. If I could have the next slide, please, Doug. There we go. Koopmans de Wet House. The original house on Strand Street was built by Rainier Smedlinger in 1701, and it was remodeled by Thibault in 1791 for Hendrik Johannes de Wet. Remember the Petit Trianon? If I could have the next picture. The Petit Trianon, you can see the resonance of the two coming through together. And you know, it was like a dream of architecture. Now, I want to describe to you, this is a drawing from Pierce's book, my old professor. This is a drawing from his book, and I want to describe to you what he says of this facade. This facade, divided vertically by 4 pilasters, carrying well-designed cornice and pediment, its charm lies in the quiet dignity and proportion of the whole. Isn't that a lovely? I mean, that's it, eh? Quiet dignity and the proportion of the whole. The door, this is where Thibault had a hell of a lot of fun, broke away for a bit of fun. It is framed by fluted columns of the Doric order. And the fanlight and this is an invention of Thibault. He put a light in the middle of the door so that the light shone into the entrance hall, but also onto the pavement, saving electricity, you see. And so Hendrik's wife carried on after he died, and she built up the most incredible collection of Cape art, of all of the kinds of things that they were producing, and we're going to talk about that just now. And her children followed her into this. Her granddaughter married a guy called Johann Christoffel Koopmans, and she has been called the mother of building heritage. And it was she that everyone says saved the castle. I mean, they were going to clap it down. She saved the castle and the powder magazine at Stellenbosch. Lovely people, hey? Wow. Then in 1791, a chap called, and he's got two fans, so I'm not muddling this up, W.F. van Rede van Oudtshoorn. He's two fans, you see. He commissioned Thibault to design a build. Can I have the next one, please, Dunks? He designed the next one. He asked Thibault to design him a house in Kloof Street. Sadly, this building was demolished. But the architects who did the monument to the Huguenots, they took the original plans and they built it. They rebuilt it. So this is the house that he designed, and it's called Sarsfield. And I think it is so charming and so simple and so beautiful. The next one we can go to, please. Now this is Tokai Manor, and this was the one that came straight after that. Although the grazing rights around the Tokai Manor house were originally held by Simon van der Stel, the estate was sold in 1792 to Johann Rauch. Johann Rauch was the armourer of the VOC. And he was the caretaker of Groote Schuur. And he bought this, and within a month he sold it to a dear fellow called Andries Toibus. And it was Andries who appointed Louis Michel Thibault to design this building. And it's a so wonderful building. And so he designed the building for Toibus, but it was so expensive that poor old Toibus went Mechula and lost the house, which is a bit sad, isn't it? And then the house was described, if I could have the next picture. This is also one of my pictures, and they don't come out so well. They don't. Let's go back to the first. And I don't know if it's my drawing or it's whether your camera. So, here we go. It was owned by one Eckstein. Eckstein, he's Peter Michel Eckstein. And he was a party animal and a spendthrift. Eckstein, I said, not Epstein. And he was famous for his parties and well known for everything about partying, and his cellars were always full. During one of Eckstein's New Year's parties, his son Frederick accepted a wager to ride his horse up these circular stairs, along the balcony, into the dining room, around, and come out the other side. And the son took this. The guests were unexpectedly, as he mounted the steps, up to the manor house on horseback. The horseman then circled the dining room, and hooves clattering on the yellow wood floor, he chatted out there with cheers and laughter from the revelers. But tragedy followed. The dinner guests rose to watch the horse and its mount depart and drive down the steep steps. The horse tripped and fell to the bottom, and the brave young man died, broke his neck, and at the bottom of the staircase. And it is said that the spectral horse and rider can still be seen in the center of the forest, and sometimes, especially at New Year's Eve, they still try to repeat that foolhardy act. Over the years, there have been many reports about this pair frequenting the area and riding round the manor house without a logical explanation. sometimes exuberant and excellent laughter and neighing of horses can be heard without explanation. And from the inside at night one can hear a party going in the dark early hours of the morning. Forest workers have heard the horse in full gallop with a young man in bygone clothes rushing towards the manor and mounting the steps. That's Takai. Then, on the 16th, next picture, thank you. Then on the 16th, next picture, next one, that one. The next, in September the 16th, 1795, the colony fell to the British Admiral George Keith Elphinstone with only token resistance. At the time, Thibault was at his post as chief military engineer, and it was in his capacity as the chief engineer to actually hand over all of the properties, the estates, the military buildings, all of those. It was his duty to hand over to the conquerors. He wrote, "I love this country, and I've lived here for 17 years. And decided to remain here with my family and live an honorable life and make myself useful during the years that remain for me to work." And then General Craig was appointed governor, and he had to write a report to England to tell them all about what they'd captured. And of course no one knew anything about anything except our boy Thibault, who had, as he put it, in 12 years of observation and work, he wrote, enabled me to gather a very interesting collection of military maps and plans. And so he became very useful, and they became friends. He became very good friends with Henry Craig. And they wrote their reports. Henry Craig was very, very impressed with him, and they had a cordial relation. In fact, Henry Craig even came and joined their lodge. He was one of the Oaks. But it then went on that Thibault turned down. Craig tried to buy all these maps and plans. And let's show you some of the maps he drew. Can we see the next one, please? This is Henry Craig. Sorry, I should have showed you him. Now the next picture, the maps. You can't see it terribly well, but here's the whole map of Cape Town, and there are the mountains. And so he had these maps, and they tried to buy them from him. And under no circumstances, they tried to blackmail him. They tried to do all sorts of things to gain, but he wouldn't. He thought that it would be inappropriate, and he thought it would be a breach of etiquette. Then Craig was very impressed with his stand. Can I have the next one, please? Next picture. Next one picture. And Earl George McCartney took over from Craig, and he was assisted by General Francis Dundas, who took over from him. And basically Thibault had quite a nice time of it. He records that they offered him works, and having suffered considerably from the loss of his profession, he accepted and he worked for them until George Young came and replaced him. Can we have George Young? George Young was a spiteful, I was going to say little bugger, but we're not allowed to say that about Sir George Young. George Young, he was an obnoxious guy, actually, and Thibault thought he would try and curry favour, and he showed him all of his plans, and somehow he nearly lost them forever, because it was only with Dundas writing from England to tell him to send them back that he managed to get his plans back. Then the next thing that happened, and it's quite interesting, is the town needed a playhouse. And so Sir George Young commissioned a playhouse. And he appointed an architect. Who else but our man Thibault? And this was the old playhouse, they called it. And the next picture, can I have the next one? This is a painting by Lady Anne Barnard of the same building. And then 6 months later, if we could have the next one now, on the 20th of April, this was a poster for shows at the, and this is in Van Riebeck Square. 6 months later, on the 20th of April, Young himself was relieved of office and replaced by Dundas until the colony was handed over to the Batavian government. And now this building is St. Stephen's Church. And it's still there, but it doesn't look like that. Now, I'm going to now talk about one of the most important buildings of Thibault's buildings. And it stretches across the handover to the Batavian Republic. And that is the drawing of the Lodge de Goede Hoop. And we've got to take a step backwards, 5 years backwards. Thibault was listed, when the lodge was refounded after the French attack, Thibault was listed as one of the founders of this here lodge. And when it was reopened on the 24th of June, Francois Duminy was listed. Our Francois, the guy who brought us the timber store, was listed as the master. And Thibault was listed as one of the founders. Now, we don't know when he actually, a year later, and still the transfer hadn't come through. And finally, when John Andries Tutor took over, the transfer finally came through. But this guy, he decided that Freemasonry had a more important role to play in the history of the town than that funny little building. And he had a really different idea. He saw Freemasonry in a different light, as a place where honorable men at the top of society, and well, there could be only one man who knew about that, and that was Thibault. So they got involved. In July 1800, they found a piece of ground called the Garden Domburg. Now, it was for sale. It was for sale for 44,000 gulden, which I think is about £1,000. And it was an enormous piece of ground. On that piece of ground today, you can go and see 15 building lots. You can go and see the Houses of Parliament, the Stahl Plain, you can see the gardens. And all of that was this piece of ground they bought for 44,000, which translated, we thought, was £1,000. And they decided that they were going to build a new lodge building there to practice their ancient art, is how they put it. And they planned to put on the new lodge, a new lodge building, and society rooms. They wanted society rooms. We're going to talk about those. And a country club where they could eat, drink, and be merry, and where they could play bowls, and a kind of golf. Just don't ask what's a kind of golf. But so they bought this, and they decided that they were going ahead. They sold their old building, and they made a little profit. They now bought, we just summarize this for ourselves, and they now bought the stand for £1,000, and Thibault started to draw the plans, and these are a copy of Thibault's original sections of the Lodge de Goede Hoop. And they hang in the lodge today, and this photograph was taken from them. You can see they're old. And what a magnificent building. You're talking about something that's 220 years old. So they made this profit, and they decided that they were going to do it. And they did the plans, and then they got a quote. They got a price estimate from Herman Schutter of £6,000 to build this place. And the contracts were resolved by November. And they started in December 1800 to lay the foundation stone with full Masonic honours. Right. So on the 15th of February, they did that. Now, you must be saying to yourself, what do these guys think? They bought a property, they made a little profit, and now they bought a site, and they're in for £7,000, which in those days was like half of the blooming amount of money that the government earned then. It was an enormous amount of money. But Tutor had a bigger agenda he was working towards. He saw Freemasonry as a major force in society. And to a large extent, that's what this became. It became incredible. There can be few lodges around the world that can boast 5 governors as members of their lodge, a prime minister, 3 presidents, and at one meeting they had 25 members of parliament, and their function rooms, which we'll come to at the end, their function rooms became the House of Parliament of the Cape for 30 years. So this guy had a hell of a good plan. Now, you're probably still worrying how he paid for it. He cut off those 15 stands, sold it, and he cleared all of the debt. And there was still enough for them to build a clubhouse and play bowls and a kind of golf, whatever that means. If we could have the next picture. Now we must get back to the time when Abraham de Mist, Baron of Uitenhage, actually was sent back to the Cape to take over the Cape back again from the English and to start running it on behalf of the Dutch, the Batavian Republic. Sorry, I'm stuffing around a bit here. And he moved into the next house, if we could have that one. This is Stellenberg. Now, I can't prove that this was designed by Thibault, but it was built at this soon after Groot Constantia, and it's very much the style of, and his handwriting. And before de Mist moved in, Thibault actually came and redid part of the house. If we could have the next picture. Next picture. And then this is part of the drawing of the house, and it's lovely. It's lovely. And then if we could have the next picture. And now this is Lodge de Goedehoop, and it's there now. And you know you can visit it. You can visit it and go inside. You've got to make an appointment. And it's a strong, bold facade. And still the most striking, it is right up to date, even though 220 years old. If I could have the next picture. The interiors are impressive, with a huge vaulted ceiling. Once, incredible statues lined all of there's those two, and then there are two behind. But unfortunately, they were destroyed in a fire in 1895. And the ones, you can't see all of them here, the ones here are plaster copies. The Hercules, representing strength, was by, no, I don't want this one yet, please. Go back. Hercules representing wisdom by Lansdowne. Minerva representing, that's wisdom by Giustiniani, is in the original, and it's in the Vatican. How do you get a copy of a plaster thing in the Vatican? And Venus representing beauty was by John Gibson, and that's in the Walker Gallery in Liverpool. I don't know how they got these, but they got them. And we don't know who did the sculpture of hope, but we now need to go, and I want to take you into the special rooms which were where Anton Anreich's original sculptures still exist. But, you know, I can tell you that I've visited lots of lodges, but I have never seen one quite like this anywhere around the world. Now, we're not here to talk about Freemasonry, but I think you should know a little bit about it in order to understand what we're going to see next. Ancient Freemasons, ancient Masons, by the nature of their work, had to travel far and wide. So often to foreign countries, often people spoke different languages, and so they developed a universal method of recognizing their qualifications and a way to get their salaries. Their secrets, their secrets are no more sinister than my darling wife's PIN number. And that's what they were. They're a PIN number. But, you know, and I don't know. You know, when I hear sometimes those, and they also had imposters trying to get hold of the PIN number. And sometimes I hear my Eileen screaming at those guys from Nigeria trying to get her PIN number. And so, but these were far more serious, because it wasn't just one PIN number which you could change, it was the whole industry. So they were pretty damn serious about it. And they were learned, they weren't learned men, but nevertheless they had to learn enough when they went out into the Khamadullas to know how to worship their God, how to educate their children, their behavior towards one another. Now can we have the special rooms? Now they used their tools, which they used in a symbolic way to teach one another their lessons, to navigate their pathway through life. And they came down, and those tools have come down to us today, yeah. I'll level with you. You've heard people say that. Every second-hand car dealer will give you a square deal. Those are the kind of Masonic lessons. And I think I'm joking, but they're right. They took their lessons from the Old Testament, mainly from the books of Chronicles and Kings and Samuel, and it's about the building of King Solomon's temple. The first degree was to contemplate in the presence of this magnificent sculpture of Thibault's called Silence. And it's bigger than life size. And a candidate sits there and meditates how to not give away your PIN number, even to those dirty, rotten, what do they come? Nigerians. And so, remembering the young Masons, ever remember those Nigerians, you guys. Now, the young Mason's first lessons were basic skills. You know, like an appy. He learned how to cut rough stones smoother. He learned how to dress stones, and he learned how to prepare them for the more expert workmen. And so those were the kind of lessons they were taught. And he was also taught how to be a good person, to love your country, to respect your elders, just to do all of those wonderful things that we all teach one another. And it's really quite a beautiful thing. Then in the second degree, they've now become more expert, and so now they've got different tools. In the apprentice, they had gavels, chisels, and a gauge measure. And in the second degree, they now get more refined tools, and all those tools also take on a kind of symbolic meaning to them. And they are like things like the square, the level, and the plumb rule. And in that degree, they teach you how to appreciate what God has given us. The mysteries and beauties of nature and science. And when I wake up every morning and I look over that Picquigny River across the beach and see the sun rising, oh boy, that second degree really comes back and it tells you stories. And the third degree, they receive the tools of creative planning, they measures, they compasses, and the skirit. Does anyone know what a skirit is? A skirit is a nail with a string around it, and it teaches you to stick to an undeviating line of conduct. Isn't that a lovely thing to do? Right, so now in the third degree, they receive those tools. And in the third degree, a Mason is taught a lot of very serious stuff. Now, there are two things in life that you can't dodge. One is taxes and the other is death. Now, the third degree can't help you with your taxes. But death, you now find yourself contemplating in a room, meditating, while they teach you that to a, and I want to get the words right here, that they teach you to feel that to the just and virtuous man, death holds no terrors equal to the stain of falsehood and dishonor. Now, those are actually quite nice lessons. But this is a building worth going to visit. And you can visit it. Everyone can visit it. You've got to make an appointment at Lodge de Goede. And there's a guy called Louis. And he's the tiler. The tiler's like a caretaker. And he will take you around and show you. And each one of these rooms, you'll sit in this chair and contemplate stuff while you're learning your lessons. And so, now if we could have the next picture. And we're going to get back to our history story. And so, the colony found itself with a new regime, with Abraham de Mist, Baron of Abraham de Mist, Baron of Uitenhage, opening up the colony. And it was a very good time from certainly Thibault's point of view, because he received many commissions to design every new building. The company and the people of Cape Town had always been proud of the gardens, but unfortunately during the British regime, they didn't bother too much about the gardens, and so our team was thrown into the front. Thibault, Anreich, and Skitter with the gardeners to restore the gardens to their former beauty. The Batavian government, and then they were also if it hadn't got round to them now, it was really being forced down their throat, that if you want to keep this southern part of Africa, do something with it. Colonize it. Go and do. And so we spoke earlier about how the timber industry started and the granary industry started in Mossel Bay. But they then commissioned 2 dross day. One of them, the first one was in Graafrenet, if I could have that. Whereas it really underlined his view of architecture and vision. And there were disputes when this was built about some of the details. And later, this building was, it was taken over by so many people and so many bad things were done to it. Some half would even put a balcony with brookie lace around it. But it was finally, thank heavens, the Oudermeester Group in 1970, in association with the Historic Homes of South Africa, acquired this historic building and commissioned the firm Munich and Fisser to restore it. And they, I think, have done a wonderful job. I really think they deserve their award incredibly. And you know, I stopped at this building every year for about 20 years on my way down to Plettenberg Bay and lived in this building, sometimes for one day on the 16th of December because the builders' holidays broke off just before then, and we'd come down and we'd stay. And so this is part of the fabric that is me, and it's taught me all about the love for architecture and the great admiration and love for this guy, Thibault. And the next building the other building, if we could have the next one, please. The next one was the Drosdier Tilbach. Now, this unfortunate building, it's had a rough time. It was, first of all, partly demolished in the beginning and then restored. We don't know how well. And then the earthquake came along and shook it to pieces, and it was restored again. And I think that if you can imagine that veranda gone, that would be more or less what it was like originally. Lovely building, eh? And then if we go to the next picture, Thibault's Fountain. This is also my drawing, but my drawings don't come out so well. Anyway, it's my drawing. And what happened is he was commissioned to redesign the entire waterfront. And one of the projects, and the only one that was actually built and nearly built, was this fountain. And it's in the middle of, it was opened by General Janssen, and it's 40 feet high, and there's a line on each 4 corners, and it's with a water spout into a drinking fountain, and it was actually built, but the rest of the waterfront didn't actually get round to build. This was built where the post office now stands. Now, and then, next picture. And then the British came back in 1806 and conquered the poor old Cape all over again and threw out the Batavian forces. Thibault seemed to have weathered this second storm even better than the first one. They decided that they weren't going to fight him, so they appointed him chief surveyor. So they gave him a job, and whereas he was busy with the Supreme Court, he was awarded this job by his old friend, John Andries Tutor, now Sir John Andries Tutor, Chief Justice of the Cape. And this was the old slave lodge. And it's the second oldest building in the entire country. It's only 4 years younger than the castle itself. Now, this building, as Oberholzer states, it is a remarkable building. Its history, its architectural merits, and the significance makes it unique in South Africa. And if we could now look at the back. And this is the back, and we're going to talk a bit about that. Thibault brought Onrath onto the team, and it must have been like old times, the two of them working together. It was hugely symbolic. Every previous regime in the Cape had slaves, including the British. And they banished slavery, but they didn't eradicate it. And it was only finally eradicated in 1814 in the place where this heinous practice was centralized. where it became the home of justice that put an end to it. Now, I just want you to look at a bit of fun. This is Anwright at his absolute best. With this back, the British were in power. The British line is looking like a really sorry, messed up guy, and the unicorn is giving him a bit of a lure. And, he's having a go at the pitifulness of the line. But if you could give me those next two pictures, I'd be so obliged. Now here, these are two gables, both designed by Thibault. This one is from the Cape Police Court. And here this was designed early in the British rule. And here you can see the line being quite aggressive, the line of Britain being aggressive, and the unicorn being a bit diffident. And this is the one that you've just seen, where the lion is, and the unicorn is cocking a lure at him, So, and I think those are the sort of things that really did well. Now, there were two things when Thibault got to 60. All that surveying for the British affected his life, and there were two things that he really wanted to do. One of them was the Masonic Institution. The Masonic Institution was a technical school, a school where they could teach local blokes how to work in timber and all that stuff. And if I could have the next picture. And the school produced this sort of thing. They could work in silver, in brass, and lovely, all of those, that big timber work and those armoires, a lot of them were made in the school. Unfortunately, he died before it really got going, and his dear friend Anton Anreich took over and ran it. Who better? And then if we could have a look at the next one. This is the society rooms. They'd been talked about for quite a long time. And in 1810, Thibault actually designed this. And if we could have that picture first, Dunks. And this is what it looked like at the beginning. It was designed as society rooms. It was like a place where you could have receptions and parties and so on. And it was of such a nature that the Parliament of the Cape met here. This was their House of Assembly for 30 years. Now if we could go back to the other one, Dunk. And this is all that's left of it. It's been everything in between. It's been a market, it's been a theatre, it's been everything. And they finally sold it to the government, and now it's part of the government properties. And so it's still there. And now, Thibault, if we could have the last picture, please, thanks. Thibault died on the 4th of November, 1815, even though the church register says the 3rd, 10 months after he finished the Supreme Court. And then he was only 65. He was buried by the lodge in a very simple tomb built by Schutte, probably designed by him. It was demolished, and there's no record of where his final resting place of his mortal remains is. What a sad reflection, almost pitiful, of his end for such a great man. But death is part of life, and although we cannot reflect at his grave, we can glory in what he left behind, a way of life, a culture, a celebration in wood and stone. Thank you. I'd just like to have one more word with you, and that's to thank you for coming to be with us tonight. You know, you are our only source of income. This last year, we have installed 12 heritage plaques, and they cost about 3,000 rands each. Not to make, but to get, you know, like when you go out to the crags, you've got to take a stonemason to go and sort it. And it's because of you that we can do it. And we're now working on our next 12 for next year. So if I get a chance to talk next year, I'll thank you again. Thank you so much.
I want to thank Rodney. Rodney is a qualified architect and he's done quite a lot of work, same as Thibault, in Johannesburg. In fact, if you know Ponty, that's the building that goes right up to the sky, Rodney designed it.
Long time ago when I was 29.
So I've got something that I want to give to Rodney, but we first open it up. Here we are. It's not a Bucky. It's not a Hilux.
And it looks like it's going to stay in this swaddling wrap forever.
Where was Thibault born?
He was born in Picquigny.
Okay, Picquigny translates into English as, you'll see this now.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I've got to cut it here.
Yeah. More.
Oh, more.
Open it. That's right. It's a penguin. Behind my hand. Okay.
Behind your hands. Okay, there we go.
Look it up. Repeat it.
Like all.
No, it's not a Hilux.
It's
It's not a Bucky, but it is a. Cut the feet.
Oh, his feet stick out.
Yeah.
Oh, there we go.
It's a penguin.
A penguin!
Take care.
Thanks, buddy.